Academic language is the language of textbooks. It's the language of schools. It's the language used in schools to talk about textbooks. It gives students the empowerment that they need to go on and be successful in academic settings. Without academic language, students cannot succeed, and they cannot go on into higher institutes of higher education. Many students will drop out if they don't learn academic language because our tests assess academic language. Students, for example, need to know how to pronounce words such as anthropology, anthropological, morphology, morphological, geography, geographical. And notice how you shift the stress in those words. Students need to know how to stress words. They also need to know how to spell words. And this is especially important for struggling readers and for English learners who may have come into the United States at different times and have just missed out on spelling instruction. In addition to this sounds or phonological component of academic language, we also have the vocabulary component. We're not going to see very many gains in test scores until students improve their vocabulary. They need to know academic words. Academic words are words used across contexts, across social studies, science, mathematical, and literature contexts, in addition to very content-specific words such as, photosynthesis in biology. That would be an example. In addition to that, they need to know common everyday words that are important in academic texts, such as adverbs, hardly, scarcely, rarely, conjunctions, and words such as nevertheless, however, so the argument goes, those kinds of words that are transition words that add cohesion in text. But that's not all that academic language refers to. It also refers to sociolinguistic competence, which is the ability to vary language appropriately. Knowing that you say sentences and words to some addressees in some ways, and then in different ways to different addressees. So you'd say, you know how to write a lab report for a science classroom, but you know how to write a persuasive essay for a social studies classroom, and you know how to participate in an academic debate, perhaps, for your English language arts class. So you know how to vary your language appropriately. That's that sociolinguistic component. On top of that, academic language also includes a discourse component, which enables you to start a conversation appropriately, keep it going, change subjects, and end it appropriately in an academic way. And this allows you to participate in debates, to give a lecture, to participate in an oral academic discussion, and it also allows you to write extensively on a piece of text. Academic language allows you to summarize, analyze critically, critique perspective, and write extended text, as I've said before. That's academic language. Not easy, but we find that it's highly teachable. Another really good activity for struggling learners, a way for them to develop academic language, is for them to understand the difference between social everyday English and academic language. One way I do this is by giving students one passage, I'll call it passage one, in formal English. It's written in informal English, and this passage begins, there are sentences in this passage that begin with the word and there are sentences that begin with the word but. That's fine for informal English. Lots of slang items, lots of hedges like such as sort of, kind of, around, about. Very simple sentence structure, simple words. And then I have the students see another passage, I'll call passage B, written in academic language. And it's exactly the same passage as passage A, except that it doesn't have sentences beginning with and or but. It has sentences beginning with however and moreover and therefore, and so the argument goes. And in addition to that, it has complex sentences. It has relative clauses. It has conditional clauses. It has passive structures. It has academic words. It doesn't have slang. And I have the students in partners list the differences in a T-chart informal English on the left side, academic English on the other side. And I ask, what are the characteristics of informal English and academic English? Students have to look very closely at that academic text, and they list the differences. They do this 4 or 5 times, and then they get the idea. Oh! In teaching vocabulary, I would really choose words that will help the students perform academic tasks in the classroom, looking at word use, not just word meaning. I would make sure that all struggling readers have a learner's dictionary. Learner's dictionaries have word meanings, and they explain how a word is used. They give lots of useful information about the word and even the words used around the word. So for example, they'll take the word discriminate, they'll give the meaning of the word discriminate, and then they'll say discriminate is often followed by the preposition against. We discriminate against someone, and they'll give a sentence using the word discriminate. These learner dictionaries are very important because one of our goals in teaching vocabulary is to get students to be we want them to be lifetime learners of vocabulary. And so they'll need to use a Longman's dictionary, or they'll need to use a learner's dictionary to continue to develop vocabulary on their own. Something else that's really a nice activity that's often overlooked for struggling language learners is what we call a cloze activity. A cloze activity could be oral or it could be written. It's simply a sentence completion activity. The first sentence and the last sentence are left intact. And then the other sentences, every nth word is deleted. And in the case of a struggling language learner, I would delete those words that are the target words that you want the student to learn. Then you have the students read the short passage. If they're really struggling, you give them a word bank, and then you read it again. A very good way to teach writing is to teach it on a daily basis and to give students not just vocabulary words, but grammatical structures and some tips on how to organize their essays. And so ask the students when they write their essays to use these specific tips, this specific vocabulary, this very specific grammar in their essays. And they don't have to use each and every one of the words and grammatical features that you choose, but it helps them. One excellent resource would be audiobooks. The advantage of an audiobook is that students can hear the language spoken to them and they learn the melody of the language. And this is so important for English language learners. They learn stress and pronunciation. But it's also very important for struggling readers in general. They learn how to read fluently, and it gives them the opportunity to practice reading along, maybe perhaps by doing shadow reading, reading after or on top of or along with the person who's reading the reading passage. Content teachers, I have good news for the content teachers. Their real goal is to teach the content, and of course they're teaching it through language, but they don't have to be reading, they don't have to become reading specialists, they will never have to teach decoding skills, for example. What they do need to teach is vocabulary, because they are teaching vocabulary anyway. So they need to learn some good strategies for that, and they do need to teach the writing that's associated with their field. So they're going to need to have good strategies for teaching writing. What I would tell content teachers, it's so important, is when you give students a reading assignment, you know that the students have to understand the reading. But oftentimes what you don't know and what your textbook won't tell you is that when you give a reading assignment that calls on students to either speak about the reading, to make a presentation about it, or to write about it, that the students will have no idea how to do this. The language of the reading may not prepare them in any way to write about the reading. And so you're going to need to scaffold that. Now, what do you do if you don't know much about grammar or language yourself? Well, what you do know is you are a content teacher. You wouldn't be where you are today if you didn't know how to write a lab report in a science class. So you know how to write. So you can provide models for your students. And the models can help students a lot. And then you can also refer to your ESL and English reading specialists, and they'll give you lots of good tips for how to teach the language features in those. Many students enter school who are older and well below grade level. And it's really important that teachers know their students and are able to understand who are the students who come in with disrupted educations and who, or for whatever reason, are well below their grade level. And I'm talking 2 years and more below grade level. For those students in the secondary level, there's no question an intensive language program, comprehensive program, is needed. But the teachers who find themselves with the students in those classrooms need to know that they're going to have to do some things differently so that those students will succeed. They need to provide those students with more instruction. And some of the instruction will be the same types of instruction I've talked about. So the cloze activity, for example, or giving word banks, those are great activities for students who are well below. The difference is they're going to require a lot more practice. And I don't mean just informal practice. They're going to need perfect practice. And they're going to need more one-on-one time with the teacher before school, after school, and during summer breaks. Some students are going to need even an extra year of instruction. Older students who come in far behind often are not motivated at all. And it's often because they have not achieved success. One of the first things that a teacher needs to do is make sure that those students achieve success. There's no reason why those students cannot progress. They will not progress to the same level. It's not realistic to think that a child who is 3 years or 2 years below level is going to be at the end of the year maybe at the same level, but those students can make remarkable progress. And so the teacher needs to make sure that he or she provides them with experiences that build success, because these students have experienced failure again and again and again. Something else that the teacher needs to do is make sure that the student understands exactly what he or she is to learn. And this is why our objectives, our state standards are so important. We need to make it abundantly clear to the student who's below level exactly what it is that he or she is to learn in the class each day, each week, each month. And then make sure that the student is held accountable. And I'm not talking about lowering our standards, I'm talking about making sure that it's fair and so that the student can learn. I also think that a lot of our activity types that we're doing are very good for all of our students, especially students who are below level, but we just have to make sure that they're scaffolded in such a way that the students can learn from them. That the students are not so overwhelmed by the task that they feel that it's just not possible and give up. Of course, critical thinking is important for all students, including students who are below level. Just because somebody is below level doesn't mean that they can't be highly creative. And so, yes, of course, we're going to be building upon creativity and creative thinking as well. Teachers who are really serious about improving their academic language instruction should be using a comprehensive program that teaches academic language, should be in a teacher professional development program linked to the instructional materials that they're using in classroom, and should seek out opportunities to improve their knowledge of language. And that might be taking a series of workshops, it might be reading books, or it might be taking some linguistic courses. Now, I would really warn people that you want to learn about the academic language that your students need to know. You don't need to know about fancy linguistic ideas. You need to know about the language features that your students are struggling with. So you need to know about how to teach verb tense, how to teach the noun system, sort of the very bare basics. How to teach an argumentative essay if you're an English teacher, how to teach a lab report if you're a science teacher. Parents need to understand that it's very difficult to learn academic language, and that academic language won't just emerge through reading. They need to know that they can help students and help their own children learn academic language by encouraging them to read, pleasure reading, and to develop a passion for reading, and in addition, to encourage them to study a lot. Think about a physics book. When you look at a physics book or think about a bio book, then you turn to that first page and you're overwhelmed with the number of words. Okay. Learning academic language is sort of like learning physics or bio for an English language learner or for a struggling reader. They have a lot to learn, and parents need to be cognizant of that, and they need to know that it's hard work and effort is required, and that they're going to have to sustain this hard work and effort over time. They also need to know that after they leave a reading intensive program or a remedial course or an ESL intensive course, that they still are going to need good academic language instruction.